From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
All the votes aren't counted yet, but Donald Trump is already naming new members of his administration. He's off to a faster start than in 2016. And what should we make of some of his early choices, as well as his public rejection of Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley as part of his second-term administration? Welcome to Potomac Watch, our daily podcast from Wall Street Journal Opinion. I'm Paul Gigot, and I'm here with Kim Strassel and Elliot Kaufman. So a couple of early decisions by Donald Trump. Kim, let's go through a couple of them fairly quickly. What do you think of Susie Wiles, his former campaign manager, as chief of staff?
I think this makes a lot of sense and it probably bodes well. Susie Wiles is known as a fiercely organized, steely character. She clearly has a good relationship with him. He has a good relationship with her. You know, obviously, chiefs of staffs are there to be gatekeepers. And I was intrigued by some reporting saying that she had a demand before she took this job, which was that she would be the say about who came in and out of the office and that there would be no more clown cars coming along. So if that is indeed the case in an administration and a president who sometimes known for chaos, that probably is a good sign.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's a tough job. I mean, Trump went through 4 of those, either acting or permanent chief of staff. And as it happens, nobody is permanent chief of staff for Trump. So good luck to her as a gatekeeper. Okay, the next, Elise Stefanik, Elliot, as the likely ambassador to the United Nations. On the one hand, she doesn't have a lot of foreign policy experience, but she does in some ways with her kind of brashness and what she did in Congress taking on the presidents of universities on anti-Semitism clearly impressed Trump. What do you think of that choice?
I think it's an interesting one. I mean, she showed her ability to make strong moral statements during those congressional hearings taking on university presidents. Well, there are lots of moral statements to be made at the UN, often on the same subject, Israel, and the sort of campaign to gang up on it by the countries there. And so if you're looking for someone to expose a lot of that, I think she could be a pretty good pick for it. On larger issues of UN reform, we've yet to see policy proposals for that. That would be a separate question.
The U.S. ambassador to the UN across history has been an important public diplomacy job. It's often had people who were willing to speak truth to the dictatorships at that body. Daniel Patrick Moynihan many years ago, Jeane Kirkpatrick under Ronald Reagan, John Bolton under George W. Bush, and of course, Nikki Haley in Donald Trump's first term. So there is that element of the job. Kim, I just want to ask you about that. Can Republicans hold her House seat in upstate New York if she is picked as ambassador? And, you know, they may only have a majority of 222, 221.
Yeah, I think there was some real thought put into this. I was looking it up, and under New York law, the governor is required to call a special election quite quickly and then to hold it quite quickly within a space of a couple of months. And Elise Stefanik recently just re-won her seat by 63% of the vote. It's a fairly red district. Her replacement here will be chosen by local Republicans, not by a special primary. So I think that the view was that this was a seat that if she went to go take this, Republicans could in very short order get somebody that they felt acceptable to them in that seat.
All right. The other 2 appointments that were notable in the last couple of days, Tom Homan as border czar. He is somebody who served in the first Trump administration. He knows the border. He knows enforcement issues. He will be Trump's border czar. And Stephen Miller, a serious immigration hawk, will be deputy chief of staff for policy, according to news reports. But let's listen to Mr. Homan talk on Fox News about his plans.
Frankly, I don't care what people think about me, especially on the left. Now, again, when you have a historic crisis, a crisis this big, here's what they need to know. When you have a crisis this big that overwhelms the Border Patrol, where the majority of Border Patrol are no longer on patrol, they're making sandwiches, they're changing diapers, they're making baby formula, they're making hospital runs, they're making airport runs. When you take most of the Border Patrol agents off the border to deal with humanitarian crisis, That's when the fentanyl comes across to kill 250,000 Americans. That's when the sex trafficking has increased 600%. That's when non-suspected terrorists has crossed this country. They've had a record of people on terrorist watches that have been arrested at the southern border.
There you have it, Elliot. Tom Homan is going to be a rough customer at the border, but he did say on that same interview that he thinks that they're going to conduct a mass deportation, but he said they're going to do it in a humane way. And he is going to do it with the criminals and bad guys in mind in the first instance. What do you make of these choices?
I mean, Trump has never been shy about this issue from the moment he entered presidential politics and even earlier. And so when you hear Homan talking there, I mean, it sounds like someone with the urgency that President Trump also brings to that issue. And so he's getting people who are devoted to carrying out his policy, which he can claim a mandate for. Now, will these people be responsible as they do it, tame some of his worst instincts, tell him when one thing might not be doable with the courts, might not be legal? We're going to find out, because they're going to have questions like that thrown at them regularly as they go forward with a rather aggressive policy.
Kim, I think that there's no doubt that Trump has a mandate for border control, border security, reducing the flow of immigrants. And he is intent on fulfilling that mandate. With these choices, I think, doing what he thinks is necessary to send a message, even before he takes office, to potential migrants: don't come. You're not getting through. So he's really trying to change the incentive structure with his messages and these appointments. And that's important. Of course, it was the exact opposite of what Joe Biden did when he took office, and we've seen where the disaster that unfolded there. The question, I think, politically for Donald Trump and his administration is, can he sustain politically support, not just for border security? I think he has that public support, but for a deportation policy. And it's one thing to get out Venezuelan gangs from housing in Aurora, Colorado. There's support for that, getting them out of the streets of New York City where they've really infiltrated. But it's quite another thing when you have deportations that will separate families if that happens, that will deport long settled immigrant families where one or the father or mother might be somebody who is illegal and been working here for 15, 20 years. That's when you get into trouble.
That's why the most important aspect of that, the piece we didn't play, was his argument that they are going to do this in a humane way. It suggests to me that the incoming Trump administration is aware of the limits of that tolerance, that they will have support if they are focused on the bad guys or they are focused on single men who just came up here, but that they're going to have to think deeply about this wider question about the millions of people who have come, and they did come as families or they came to join families. And that's why I do wonder if one of the things that wouldn't help them is to take a broader look when they're coming into office about these questions of asylum law and get our rules straight on how this works. Maybe take a look at the network of judges that we have that are hearing these cases, because there's such an enormous backlog. But there are some bureaucratic and legal questions to deal with, quite aside from deportation, that I think could help them politically as they move forward with these plans.
Much of what they want to do can be done administratively, although it'll be challenged in the courts, no question about it. But the longer run success of his policy, making it durable, would certainly help if you could get some things through Congress. And that will be difficult. Maybe the Democrats, having just been drubbed, might be more willing to negotiate a bipartisan deal. I don't know. We'll have to see. Certainly Kamala Harris supported one at the end, but of course she is now going to be out of Congress. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk about why Donald Trump decided to say he will not appoint Nikki Haley or Mike Pompeo in his second-term administration. Welcome back on Polls You Go here on Potomac Watch with Elliot Kaufman and Kim Strassel. I want to talk now about what was, I think, in many ways, the most important event from a transition point of view over the weekend, which was appointments that weren't made. In fact, it was a Truth Social post by Donald Trump essentially announcing that he will not appoint Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo, who served him in the first term, in a second term. Now, this is, Elliot, interesting in a couple of ways, but one is that he didn't have to do that. I mean, presidents-elect usually don't say, I'm not appointing him. And even though he said nice things about their service, there was a pointed message there, it seemed to me, about Pompeo. I mean, Nikki Haley ran against him. I get it. There's some residual tension there, even though she came around and supported him in the general election. Pompeo thought about running, decided not to, and then supported him. But what do you make of this essentially declaration that was a kind of an attempt to publicly embarrass them?
That's right. I mean, so there are two angles here. One is the loyalty angle. One is the policy angle. Loyalty, as Trump sees it anyway, Nikki Haley violated that by going after him, by running against him. Just that. Pompeo never went after him, but as you said, he considered running against him. The consideration was considered a violation of loyalty, disloyal behavior. And so I think that's part of this public message, not only not choosing him, but saying specifically, singling them out that they will have no involvement. So that's loyalty. The other angle, however, is policy. Both of these two figures are seen as being on the more hawkish end of Republican foreign policy thinking, supporting a strong foreign policy, internationalist foreign policy. Their critics start using totally hyperbolic terms, warmonger, neocon, these sorts of things. And if you want to send a message about a policy direction, one way to do it would be to single out these two and say they won't be involved.
Kim, you were doing a little reporting on this over the weekend, as was I. And the role here behind the scenes of Donald Trump's son, Don Jr., of Tucker Carlson, of some of the Silicon Valley isolationists and money guys like David Sachs, and then the mega online universe really targeting. There was a real campaign to keep Pompeo out. And this suggests the influence of Don Jr. And I just want to point out a tweet that he gave over the weekend. There was a mega type who tweeted on Sunday that the Stop Pompeo movement was great, but it's not enough. We need to put more pressure on the administration, get rid of the war hawks and neocons. It's a Trump administration. I didn't know that the first Trump administration had been known for its war hawks and neocons. But
it wasn't.
But that Don Jr. retweeted this with an assent, agreed 100%, 100%, 100%, 3 exclamation points. I'm on it. Unquote. I guess the Secretary of State, Don Jr., is now telling his dad who he can appoint.
Yeah, I think one thing that this tweet that Trump put out is it just put in very stark relief that there's a little war going on behind the scenes right now between what I would call the first termers, the people that were around Donald Trump and advised him on a lot of policy decisions that time around. By the way, people who are well respected, many of them wise men and women in the GOP, versus the new sort of influencers, as it were, this next generation. They've been forged in politics under a lot different influences. I would just note that some of them are younger. They have lived and come of age much more in the Trump era of politics, for better or for worse. But you've got Don Jr., you've got Tucker Carlson, you've got Elon Musk. Tulsi Gabbard apparently was another one that was telling Donald Trump, you must not choose Mike Pompeo. But I think there's a further interesting aspect of this, Paul, which you can look at it, as Elliot says, and I think he's right, through the policy lens. The other piece of this, though, that is slightly more Machiavellian is apparently, and the word is out, that Don Jr. obviously was a big force behind getting J.D. Vance chosen as a vice president. And he would like to see him inherit the Trump mantle. And apparently there's a big push going on behind the scenes that Donald Trump not name anybody to a cabinet position who could be a 2028 presidential candidate. And there could be little question that both Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo would have been prime candidates for such a run. So that seems to maybe be playing into this as well.
Yeah, my reporting suggests the very same thing. This is partly about 28, but I think it's also partly about this is really significant for the influence of Don Jr. and his coterie.
Yes, absolutely.
He sort of uses the online mega types to put pressure on politicians, right? They're also trying to put pressure, the same group put pressure on Republican senators to name Rick Scott as the new majority leader to succeed Mitch McConnell when they have their vote this week. I don't think that pressure is going to work, but you're going to see this throughout this administration as it unfolds. And Tucker Carlson is going to play a very big role in that. He is trying to essentially threatening people with retribution on his various airwaves if somehow they don't vote the way he wants them to in Capitol Hill.